Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I'd like to talk about the money conversations that you need to have in a relationship. Now, today, I'm going to kind of piggyback on material that's already been written, and I like to give credit where credit is due. I know that sometimes that doesn't always happen. I've had material of my own liberally borrowed without being returned and without permission. So I want to kind of do the right thing ethically and really give credit to another author. In my kind of morning self-care ritual, I do reading. I look at the news or I look at suggestions online. The browser, Firefox, will learn to know your browsing patterns and suggest articles. And so it's getting good over time, and it suggested an article that it thought that I would like, and indeed I did, and I want to share it with you. But what I also want to do, though, is discuss it like I have sometimes before in a gay male context, because that's my thing. You know, LGBT affirmative therapy in general, but therapy and coaching for gay men and gay male couples in particular. I always say out of LGBT, I focus on the G, not to take anything away from the other parts of that, but I think it gets too broad to serve all of those communities equally, with lesbians and bisexuals and trans masculine, trans feminine, and bisexual men, bisexual women, all of that. So anyway, that's why, I'm gaytherapyla.com and direct everything towards gay men, because each of the LGBT communities, I think, needs its own specific resource. We don't want to get too general in this kind of all lives matter kind of thing, to be specific. And the cultural and the clinical and the psychological and the social implications of gay male relationships are different. I've written before and made podcasts before about the difference between gay and straight relationships, or straight relationships and gay male relationships. And one kind of subset of that is about money. So today's discussion is going to be about money, and more specifically, the conversations to have about money in a gay relationship. Now, this article that I liked so much, that had a stock photo of a heterosexual couple on its landing page, which is one of the reasons why I want to make it more gay specific, is on something called walletjoy.com. Wallet as in you keep your money in a wallet. Walletjoy.com and / money-conversations before getting married. It's actually in the section about planning a wedding, and 7 must-have money conversations you need to have before getting hitched. And this is by Elyssa Kirkham. Isn't that a pretty name? Elyssa, Elyssa, Kirkham, Kirkham. And this is from November of 2019 that she wrote this. And I think she was very clever. It's very comprehensive, and rather than reinvent the wheel with my own version, I just want to piggyback on Ms. Kirkham's article and kind of, in a sense, review it, but with lots of credit to her. But I just want to kind of reinterpret it for gay men. So, she starts off the article that says, on the first date you discuss splitting the bill. Soon you're planning your first vacation together. Before you know it, you're engaged in planning a wedding. If you haven't already, it's time to have the money talk. Financial things to talk about before getting married. Talking about money can be heavy, but it's important to have these conversations now. To help you cover the bases, here are some key financial topics you and your partner should discuss prior to marriage. Now, what I'm going to do is go through these 7 items for you, and you can see the original article on walletjoy.com, but I want to give some commentary to make it more specific to gay men. Because in my practice, doing both relationship therapy, local to clients in California, or if I serve clients outside of California in other states in the United States or abroad, all over the world. We call it relationship coaching, which has a different focus, but I offer both services under my general practice name or website, gaytherapyla.com. And so I want to go through these in the order that Ms. Kirkham does. And the first one is talking about money mindsets and overall beliefs. And she says, what are your biggest financial successes or setbacks? What are some lessons you've learned about managing money? And what do you believe about money and the role it plays in your life? Now, certainly that would be topics for anybody. But if we say, what are the special considerations for gay couples in this, same-sex male couples in this, we might say, what are your biggest financial successes? Now, some of that might be informed by a bit of male privilege. When we have two men, there's that statistic that women only make 73 cents on the dollar for every dollar a man makes. And that would be both gay and straight. There would definitely be, male privilege would extend to gay men as well as straight men, even though I think there are some statistics that say that gay men earn a little less because of anti-gay prejudice in some settings. But where I work in a major urban center like Los Angeles, and some of the guys that I work nationwide or worldwide, sometimes just to afford a private practice therapist in a city with a high overhead, the fees are higher. And so some of these guys are higher earning. And then if you're lower earning and can't afford a private practice, either with me or one of my associates, that's why we have this. We have the podcast, we have a library of blog articles on gaytherapyla.com, and my book. We'll plug the book in a little bit, because I have it right here in front of me, and I want to tell you about some things that are in my book, Self-Empowerment, Have the Life You Want. So when Elyssa Kirkham talks about the importance of having money mindsets and overall beliefs, you might have some financial successes, with male privilege, being an executive, being in a high-paid field. And there was the book, The Best Little Boy in the World, that talked about how gay men sometimes can be overachievers because they're defending against social criticism for being gay. And it can be a phenomenon that we can be these overachievers because we want accolades in another area when we're getting denigration in one area for being gay, whether we're out or not even. And so we might be driven by that to defend against a sense of being, taken down by making good grades, or by being the star athlete, or by being the star in the arts, the singer, the actor, the artist. And then we might also have setbacks. Gay men are in their families and in their lives can have setbacks like anybody. We might have an injury or an illness that keeps us from working and we're on a disability income, either temporarily or permanently. We might have had a setback with a major car repair. A major home repair can be a setback, sometimes thousands of dollars if you need a major plumbing repair or a major electrical repair. If you've been in a car accident, or if you've had some kind of accident at home that requires a repair, like a flood or a fire or wind damage, like in a hurricane or tornado or something. There might be a medical setback where you've had something medically where your co-insurances and co-payments are high, even if you have insurance. And if you don't have insurance, you may have a big hospital bill because you don't have enough coverage. It's the United States. We have way too many people uninsured or underinsured. So having a discussion between you and your partner A and partner B, about just what your financial successes and setbacks have been, in the history of your life, is important to understand where you're coming from. Elyssa Kirkham says that this is a premarital discussion, and I do premarital counseling for gay men, or it doesn't have to be marriage, it can just be moving in together, cohabitation. But before you're making a big domestic commitment to live with one another, she emphasizes, and I agree, and I've emphasized this before, about how imperative it is for you guys to sit down and have a discussion about money, even if it's icky and awkward. And in fact, especially because it's icky and awkward, you need to have these discussions. So you may want to just kind of sit down, maybe in multiple sittings, not all at once, it'll take you hours, to discuss your money mindset and your overall beliefs, as Kirkham says, and talk about, what are your successes and setbacks, both historically and also currently, or maybe ones you're anticipating. What are some lessons you've learned about managing money? Did you learn lessons from a businessman father or a businesswoman mother? Or did you have an older sibling or even a younger sibling who somehow taught you lessons about managing money? Or have you made a study of how to manage your finances as you've grown older, college and beyond? I have a client who started his stock portfolio and is 12 years old with his dad's help, and he's been a stock market enthusiast ever since. And he's taught me a few things in the course of conversations and sessions about what he does and why he does it. It's a fun conversation. You might learn about managing money because your family, it's so much a dad thing. It's such a male role. It can be a mom. I've known a lot of very financially savvy women, but it does have a certain masculine implication to managing money. In a lot of heterosexual couples, the man or the husband manages the money, and women have more domestic roles. That's a little sexist, but there's a lot of social pressure for men to be the breadwinner or the higher income of the two, even with modern heterosexual couples. And when we have two men in a couple, we tend to have the buying power of two men in society. They don't have to be white, because I've seen male couples where both of them are ethnic minorities, African Americans, Latinos, Asian. But there's a lot of social stuff about being straight or white or male that implies money management. And people like Suze Orman, the lesbian financial planner who's written a lot of great books. Suze Orman is S-U-Z-E, Suze Orman, O-R-M-A-N. And I like to plug her books because she's a lesbian, and I like to support gay and lesbian authors, as opposed to somebody like Dave Ramsey, who is a financial author, but he's known to be anti-gay. So I don't endorse Dave Ramsey. Even though I read one of his books, it was okay, but on principle, I do not buy books from homophobic people, and I don't see movies with homophobic actors. But Suze Orman, it's a good egg. And so managing money can be from books, or maybe online seminars, or if you have a brokerage firm like Vanguard, or although I hear Vanguard has kind of a bad reputation, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, all of those would have certified financial planners that help you learn about managing money. But I would interview your partner to see what are the lessons that they've learned, or do they have any? Are they a blank slate? That happens a lot. The third question in this first section, what do you believe about money and the role it plays in your life? Is it very important to you? Do you judge your success by how much you earn? Do you judge other people by how much they earn? How do you measure success? Do you consider yourself a success if you get a big raise this year, and a failure if you don't? It's things like that. What do you believe about money and the role it plays in your life? Now, for many gay men, particularly in urban centers that I know, money is a very important part, because the stereotype is, gay men have good taste. We want good furniture. We want good clothes. We want a good place to live. We want a good car. And all of those things imply that these are expensive items, but yet they would be very common in the gay community to have certain markers of success. And that could be seen as another defense against denigration, is that, you might denigrate me for being gay, but you know what, I'm driving a Mercedes. What do you got? It's that kind of thing. And then maybe not. Maybe you're with a partner who's like, okay, you want the Mercedes. I don't give a crap what I drive as long as it gets me from A to B. In fact, I'd rather take an Uber. That's fine. You don't have to break up over something like that, but you might want to be aware of it. You might want to be aware that you have different beliefs about money and the role it plays in your life. And then you say as a couple, how do we get around that? I always say with couples, a lot of the task of couples is navigating difference. So if you talk about your beliefs about money and the role it plays in your life, then you have to have another conversation about compromise, about how do we get around the fact that I think a large part of our household budget should be on at least one of us having a luxury car, even if you don't care about that. Or another thing about money, it's important to me that we be charitable about money and that we're seen at gay community fundraisers for HIV or for gay youth or something like that. And the other person might be, I don't care about those events. Black tie's uncomfortable, But if that's important that you attend charity events, for example, that would be something to talk about. And then you compromise about what are the workarounds if you find yourself in having different belief patterns. So number 2 is talk about your financial background for each partner. What kind of financial behavior did you see modeled growing up, Kirkham says. How did money impact your parents' relationships? Did you witness your parents go through a traumatic divorce? Did you see your parents fight over how money should be spent in the household? Were you raised by a single parent who was resentful about paying a large alimony to the remaining partner or spouse? Were your parents good with money and they taught you good habits? Or were they always kind of behind on bills, or did they have a bankruptcy, or live very hand to mouth, and that was a source of stress for you even as a child? Were you frustrated by not having clothes for school or toys? Were you living in a dangerous neighborhood because that's all that your parent could afford to live in with you? The second question is, how did your family's class or economic status affect your money beliefs? Some people grew up fairly wealthy and kind of resented it because it came with a lot of baggage, and some people grew up very poor, and so that affected their beliefs, kind of like Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, as God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again. I worked with a man who was very, very successful in Hollywood, a classic Hollywood executive, but because he grew up poor, he was determined to be wealthy as an adult and had a singular focus on what it meant to be successful, a strong part of his sense of self. And he had strong goals that he met like clockwork at every age. How are our financial histories similar, and how are they different? Because just being aware with your partner, it's like, okay, I grew up middle class, you grew up upper middle class, so you know and see the world a little differently. Or I grew up very poor maybe in another country, and you grew up in a very affluent upper middle class American household, and so how is that different? Because that's not only a financial difference, that would also be a national or a cultural difference. Are there ethnic differences between how one family of one ethnicity or background versus another one, that they might have different histories, or you might have different views about money? Number 3, according to Kirkham, is life and financial goals. What are your shared major life goals? And does this include starting a family? Because if you're partnered with somebody who really wants to go down the road of adopting children from, your local or county Department of Children and Family Services, being a foster parent, or adopting, that would definitely be something to think about, as you're cohabitating. And part of your compatibility is, do you both not want kids? Do both of you want kids? Or do you have a dilemma where one partner wants kids and the other one doesn't? And Starting a family is a major life goal, but then it also has enormous, enormous financial implications. Do you make enough money to have the size of home where a child or children could have their own bedroom, which is usually a requirement for adoption? Do you have the money to pay a surrogate mother to carry a child and the medical expenses and things like that, which can sometimes be over $100,000? I've known several gay couples that have gone that route, but they had the money to do that. Do you have the means for both providing for your own retirement life as a couple and also provide for your children's education? Colleges and universities don't have as many scholarships, and the federal government has gone back and back and back and back on things like student loans with more conservative presidential administrations, and what used to be grants are now loans, and scholarships dry up unless it's private philanthropy. So you're really expected to pay a lot, and no 18-year-old can earn $100,000 a year at 18 to pay for college, all the expenses for college, or else they probably wouldn't need college in the first place. So the parents are really expected in American society anyway to pay most or all of their children's college education, at least in middle class or upper middle class or higher families. So the question becomes, how do you raise children, including their education, and also provide for your own retirement? Somebody like Susie Orman would have a lot to say about that. Do you have other major life goals? Do you want to save money in order to have a house or a condo and not rent? Do you want to have a life goal of having the capital to fund your own business? Maybe you work for someone else, but what you really want to do is have the capital to open your own business, which would take money as a financial goal. Do you want to collect something? Is your dream to buy a certain kind of antique car or a high-end piece of art or something like that? But I would talk about what is a major life goal, or what's on your bucket list, and then how much is the price tag attached to that bucket list item. How do these goals impact our lives or our careers or income and our finances? So if one of your life goals is to live in a foreign country, for example, I want to live in the outback of Australia and be close to nature. What does that mean about your career and your income and your finances? What kind of money would it take to live part of the year in one city and maybe live another part of the year in another way? What financial actions will we need to take to support our shared goals? Now, this would be part of a financial planner. There are people who are called CFP, Certified Financial Planners, and there's another designation called a fiduciary, meaning that they've formally pledged to only work in your interests and not in the interest of their commissions. And there are certified financial planners that specifically respond to gay male couples. And, so they take all of the stuff that a heterosexual couple might be talking about, but make it more specific to gay men. Like maybe a straight couple is all about having children, and their financial goal would be financing the children's education, but maybe a gay couple doesn't want kids. Maybe instead of having kids, they want to have a very robust travel budget. They want to be able to take an international vacation every year and visit a different country every year as part of their growth and part of their fun as a couple. So a CFP who knows gay men might talk about how that could be arranged as a goal, and then look at the specific assets and liabilities that a gay male couple might have that no other type of couple would have. So that's important to probably have the specific help of a financial planner at some point. There's some who work by taking a percentage of your investments, and there's some who work by the hour. The going rate in a lot of places is about $250 an hour, and then how many hours would it take to interview the both of you and then establish a financial plan that you would follow to stay on goal for theoretically many years, decades, from being young people together to being very old men together, assuming that you're really making a life together for the long term. And sometimes in gay male couples and other couples, sometimes sharing shared goals and dreams and sharing your financial dreams are a part of staying together, because you're making a commitment to what it means to live together over the long term, which lots of straight couples do. Think about your grandparents. Oh, we had our 50th anniversary. We don't tend to think of that as much for gay men and gay couples, but there's certainly plenty of gay male couples that are together for 50 or 60 years. So if you're a young man, it's entirely possible that if you're both young men now, you will live together and grow to be one of those cute older gay couples that you see, sometimes on the beach or in resorts or in a restaurant or something like that. There's plenty of those. And we have to fight against the kind of homophobic, negative stereotype, oh, gay relationships don't last. Or, wow, you've been together a year. Wow, that's 10 years in straight years. Those things can be kind of funny, but we want to challenge this homophobic notion that gay relationships don't last. And one of the ways they last, I think, is having a commitment to shared dreams and goals, and that includes the price tag and the financial aspects of your shared dreams and goals. Number 4 is discussing debts and credit history. What kinds of debts do you have, and what are the details for those accounts? Do you have student loans? Are you getting together as young men who are college graduates, and maybe you have student loans? Do you have a debt because of an accident or an illness that you had, and you're paying off a large hospital bill over time from something that happened when you were younger? Do you have a debt because something went wrong in a business you were involved with, maybe right out of college, a startup that failed or something, and you've got a debt for that? So do you have a large credit card bill, for example? Do you have a large car payment where you have a nice car, but you have a lot of payments left to go, and the payments are expensive every month? Do you have a large rent or a large mortgage on where you live? And each of you would take a turn talking about what debts you have on paper. Where are the burdens that you have to be careful about so you keep current? Do you make minimum payments on those debts, or are you working to pay debt down faster? Somebody like Susie Orman, or another one, Jane Bryant Quinn, is another great money author. She's not as well known as Susie Orman, although she's been at it longer. She's older, and she's right up there with Susie Orman. So if you look at the books, I don't know the title. It's something about busy people. Jane Bryant Quinn's money book for busy people, or something. Just think of the word busy. But Susie Orman or Jane Bryant Quinn would talk about how to systematically paying down debts beyond the minimum payment, so that it took me 16 years to pay off my MSW, the Master of Social Work from USC, where I now teach. And I always tell my students I do it all over again, because even 16 years of student loan payments was worth it, to be an MSW, to have my career. But I also always paid more than the minimum, because it was a 25-year student loan originally, and then I paid it off in 16 because I paid a little extra every single month for 16 years, and that's how it shaved 9 years off the course of a 25-year loan. See, that's just an example for you. What is your credit history and score like? These days on online banking on a website or certain banking apps, or even just online, you can enter in your social security number if you're in the United States, and your date of birth and some other things, and then it will give you your FICO. Oh, I'm not sure what that's an acronym for. Federal Insurance something. But it'll give you your FICO credit score, which is a scale from 0 to 850, and how relatively reliable a credit risk you are. The higher the score, the easier it would be to get a car loan or to get an apartment lease or to get a credit card or to qualify for the better credit cards that offer many benefits and lower interest rates. So you would want to discuss, or do you have demerits to your credit score? Do you have a bankruptcy? Or do you have a history of late or unpaid payments? So if your life goal would be to share an apartment with your partner now, but you want to buy a condo or a house together, you'd want to discuss what your credit history and scores are like to see how likely it would be that you would qualify for a mortgage loan, for example. And, it shouldn't be harder for gay couples to qualify for loans for a mortgage or for a car. There's laws really against that in a lot of places. You can't discriminate based on sexual orientation. But I've had the experience of trying to refinance a mortgage relatively recently into same-sex marriage. I think it was about 2008. Or 2009. I was married in 2008 in California before Prop 8. And we tried to do a refi on our mortgage. And this bouncy little girl, who was the mortgage broker, kept saying, I have to check on that. I said, well, it's the same for a male married couple as it is for a heterosexually married couple. And she would, I have to check on that. I think it might be different, but I'm not sure. I have to check on that. And, that resistance, I have to check on that, was really a form of not so subtle homophobia. And we ended up finding another mortgage broker who, was a little more clear on being comfortable with a same-sex married couple. So you shouldn't have any trouble with that, but, in some cases, whether it's the individual you're working with or even the firm that you're working with and where it is, gay men buying things together like a house or a car can be a little more complicated, particularly if you're not domestic partners or married and you're just individuals. You kind of have to work hard to make sure both of your names are on the car or on the title and the financing, especially if one of you has a high credit score and the other one has a lower one. They're going to want to really finance through the guy with the higher score because it's easier to finance. Some of you have probably already had that experience. Number 5 is talking about your spending and savings habits. How much are you earning? Nobody likes to talk about their salary. I make $65,000 a year. I make $325,000 a year. I make $110,000 a year. Very few people will name that number about what their annual salary is. But when you're talking about getting married or cohabitating, you definitely want to name numbers. How much do you make in a year, or how much have you made as reported on your taxes for the last 3 years? And what portion of that are you saving? If you get direct deposit of your paycheck at work, does a certain amount automatically go into your savings account every month? That's an easy way to save. Do you have a habit? I have a lot of very strict money habits that I put on myself, and I don't mind the burden of a lot of habits, because to me it makes me feel more secure and more confident in my long-term financial plan. So I have a habit of investing 15% of my income every week into my long-term retirement and another 5% into an emergency fund, which Susie Orman talks about, having an emergency fund. And so, I basically live on 80% of what I earn every week, and I save the other 20. Now, sometimes I have to dip into my savings if there's a, car repair or household repair or some kind of setback, but it's just a habit. If you are paid from a paycheck and you're not self-employed like me, then you might direct some of your paycheck to go into your savings account. And you can do that with a lot of corporate payroll, where a certain amount goes into your checking that you live on, and then another percentage or another amount goes into your savings account, and it builds over time, and you kind of don't have to think about it. Do you keep and follow a budget? Some guys do. Most guys don't. But you might want to think about a financial software like Quicken or QuickBooks or Microsoft Money. And do you want to make a budget for yourself about how much you spend on entertainment, bars and clubs, dinners out, leisure travel, clothing, transportation, housing, following a budget. And that can be contentious because this gets into your values between you and your partner. You may want to have a high amount of budget on eating out because you like restaurants and you like to be out. He might have more of a value of, no, let's not eat out so much. Let's save for our vacations. And then you have to think about, how do you compromise on that? Or having a discussion about when is it worth spending on something and what isn't. Well, I think spending on a cleaning person every week or every couple weeks is an investment in our home because I don't like to clean things. Whereas the other partner might say, I don't think we should have a cleaning person. I think we should clean ourselves and then save that money and put that toward something that we want instead. How much do you already have in savings and what is your net worth? Again, that's a very immodest question, but that's the kind of question you need to ask of your partner when the stakes are high, when you're moving in together or getting married, because there's legal implications. Your assets and your debts would be combined when you're married, and so you want to talk about, do you have a large savings account? Do you have an investment account? Have you been investing in stocks since you were 12 years old? And what is your net worth? Using probably an online calculator to calculate your net worth. Do you own property? Do you have investment accounts? Do you have bank accounts? Do you have income property? Do you have some kind of commodities? Do you even have a savings account, or do you just have whatever's in your checking account each month? And then try to calculate your net worth. And then think about what happens if there's a big difference. If one person, inherited his grandfather's house that he rents out in Fort Worth, Texas, and also has a savings account with $20,000 in it and a 401k brokerage account with work at his law firm that has $110,000 in it, and the other person just has $2,850 in their checking account and no savings account and no property and no equities and no 401k, you'd want to talk about, again, navigating difference. What do we do about that? Does the person who has the higher net worth make the rules? That's an awkward thing in gay couples, because in gay male couples you sometimes have two very competing men, and so issues of power and control can come up, especially when they're related to finances, because there's an implication, the old joke, the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. But is that always true? Does the partner who earns more or has more in net worth, does his way always become the law of the land in your house? Probably not. You'd want to have a way of discussing that. Number 6 is managing money together, as Kirkham says. Do you want to fully combine finances for some accounts or keep funds separate? Now, for gay male couples, this is especially true because combining all of your money and say, well, what you earn and what I earn, it all goes into one big pot, and, when you need to go out and buy a shirt, that's fine. When I need to go out and have a car repair, that's fine. But a lot of times a gay male couple can find that emasculating. It's, no, I want at least some money of my own account. So if I want to buy an autographed picture of Judy Garland, I can do that even if you think that's stupid. So maybe you don't like Judy Garland, but maybe I like to collect autographed pictures, and maybe I'm a Judy Garland freak, and having an autographed picture would be the greatest thing in the world, and I found one on eBay. So that's why you might want to talk about what you combine versus what you keep separate. And I'll give you an example. In my relation, I'm not saying you have to do everything in my relationship, but in my relationship with my husband, we earn very, very similar amounts, slight difference. But we contribute equally to a joint savings account, and then we pay everything for the household, our mortgage, our utilities, everything out of the household account. But we also have separate checking and savings accounts so that if one of us wants to buy something that the other one doesn't have much interest in, it doesn't come out of the joint account. It comes out of our individual accounts. And that gives us a sense of autonomy, and it prevents a resentment that we can't have the things that we want, you know. And most couples kind of have at least one area where one partner wants to spend on it and the other one doesn't. And if you each have a little bit of money, at least in your own separate accounts, then you get to do that thing, at least occasionally. But yet you might contribute to a joint account. Or if your partner makes, $10 for every dollar that you make, then maybe you would contribute to a joint checking or joint household account in that proportion. You put in $100 a week and he puts in $1,000 a week, because that would be 10 times more. And then what you have to spend is whatever is in the household account. And you just, instead of splitting it equally, if you have equal incomes, you split it proportionately, but then you live on that household account. How will we share the responsibilities and tasks of managing household finances? Like, I'm very detail oriented, and I have a background in some business management, of course, running a practice, being self-employed and running a private practice. And so I tend to use Quicken, the money management software, and I pay the bills in our household. And I'm happy to do that because I don't find it hard. My husband finds things like keeping track of receipts and keeping track of bills to be very, very tedious. He didn't want to deal with that. He would rather take a turn at another kind of household chore, like picking up dry cleaning, or some things like that. And so part of a gay male couple, and really any couple, is dividing household chores. And I always say with heterosexual couples, there's so much gender implication. Something goes wrong with the car, dad takes care of it. Something goes wrong with the oven, mom takes care of it because mom's doing the cooking. Some of these things are antiquated sex role stereotypes, which I like to challenge. However, if you look at your own family, your parents, your grandparents, if you had heterosexual parents, or even some of your siblings, I bet you find that things about the yard and mechanics and things like that are about dad, and things that are very domestic are about mom. And even liberated women today sometimes fall into more gender stereotypes than they think. Not always, but, gender roles are very powerful. But when you have two gay men, what happens when the oven breaks? There's no mom, there's no wife, to take care of these traditionally female roles. So, which partner looks into having a repair for the oven? So there has to be more of a discussion, because you don't have gender role stereotypes to fall back on how to manage a household. So you'd have to kind of really sit down and say very explicitly, how are we going to share the responsibilities and the tasks of managing the household finances, so that we don't get into paying bills late and having the electricity shut off. Another aspect of managing money together is, what are your feelings about a prenuptial agreement, and what do you want that to include? I did a lot of work with several gay male couples once marriage equality became legal in California and in the United States. I worked with guys on whether to have a prenuptial agreement, because that can have implications about things like trust and reliability and attaching values to a legal document. And then also, what does that mean? Exploring together what is fair in a prenuptial agreement. I work with some high-end guys in Los Angeles. It can be a very high-income place. And I worked with an executive who said, I came into this relationship with $1 million in the bank. If I leave this relationship for any reason, or if you do, I want to make sure that that original $1 million is preserved, however we have to arrange that. But I want to be able to say that I left with at least what I came in with. And that was where they started. And then they had other dynamics. One of them had known about contentious divorces and wanted to really avoid that. So it's that, or if you have a prenuptial agreement, is the first step. And then the second step would be, and what does that look like? And then once you decide what you want it to look like, then you would have each of you represented respectively by a gay-savvy family law attorney who would help you codify a prenuptial agreement into the actual text that you can sign. And then that's a legal service that each of you would have to buy. And you have to be careful that your attorneys don't ask you to do something different from what you and your partner or your fiance have already agreed on, which I've seen happen. So the last one that Kirkham talks about is other financial obligations. Do you have financial obligations outside of yourself, such as supporting a child? In some gay couples, they might have been heterosexually married, and they have children from their previous marriage before they came out as gay men. And so they might be putting their children through college, or they might want to pay for their child's wedding, or they might want to provide for their children in their will because it's their children. Do you have a partner who has to have capital for running his business, such as running a law firm or running a medical practice, or running any kind of business, a restaurant maybe? Or do you have parents or siblings or other family members who need financial assistance from you in the future? Do you have does one of you have elderly parents who don't have their own means, and then they might need support as they become elderly to be in a nursing home or assisted living or something like that? Maybe they need a caretaker, but they can't pay for one, and that might become a financial burden on you. And Susie Orman would say you have to be very careful about that, because you don't want to spend your financial security and your retirement on your parents who failed to plan. And you have to troubleshoot that. That's a fairly common family dynamic, even for gay men. For siblings, do you have a disabled sibling that needs some kind of financial support because they can't make money on their own? Maybe they're disabled and they can't make ends meet on a disability income, so you help your disabled sibling. Or some other family member that needs some kind of financial assistance that you can provide and that you want to provide because you feel it's the right thing to do. If that's true in your original family of origin, you'd want to talk about that with your partner or your fiance to kind of say, okay, in addition to everything that you and I talk about, we have to plan for the fact that, my mother is a widow and lives by herself in another city, and she can't make ends meet on her own. So you'd want to really look at those outside influences. And Kirkham also gives these final tips about how to talk about money with your partner, to kind of ease into it, because we're not really taught to talk about money with other people. We're kind of taught culturally that that's a very close to the vest topic and that it's private. I always joke that, I have friends that will talk about what they'll do in the bedroom before they talk about how much money they make. It's because, they don't attach a stigma to, having wild kink sexual interests or something like that. But they do attach a lot of meaning, and they get real shy when it comes to money. So Kirkham's tips are, number one, don't rush it. Just set your own pace and take breaks, have these conversations over a period of time. And it's very important to pace yourself with what therapists call affect regulation. If you or your partner gets very agitated talking about money because it brings up bad memories and it presses a lot of buttons for you, then set a very slow pace and monitor yourself for when you're getting upset, to take a breath and take a step back and go back into it without feeling overwhelmed with anger or despair or frustration. Number 2 is observe your partner's money behaviors. And she says that while it's important to have money conversations, she points out that you can learn much just by observing your partner's money management. Take note of what questions come to mind and find a time to talk about those more. Do you find him frequently spending money in ways that you think are foolish? Do you see him being inattentive to the bills he has? Does he talk about forgetting things and then having to pay extra because he paid a bill late? Just kind of observe what you see already, because that behavior would probably continue when you're living together or married, and just be an extension of habits when each of you were single. Be curious and suspend judgment, she says. Instead of getting judgmental or defensive about money, give your partner the benefit of the doubt. You may not agree with how your partner behaves with money or their beliefs about it, but their experiences are their own, and you're going to have to work with your partner as he already thinks and feels and believes. And if you want to try and change that, then gently kind of state your case and kind of explain why you want him to make some kind of change. And say something like, can we discuss a different way of looking at that in a way that you might find helpful? And without that seeming too paternal to your partner. Assume that you won't always agree. And this is going to be a challenge, because it would be very unrealistic to expect a partner to agree with you on every little item, but instead look for the common ground of the bigger picture and then try to be flexible and make compromises. Even if you say, okay, I think it's really stupid to spend $10,000 on some kind of collectible antique, but if it's going to increase in value and you really love it and you have to have it, well, then maybe we make that a showpiece in our home. And then, when you want to buy a set of, platinum covered golf clubs or something and he thinks that's dumb, well, that's his turn to be flexible. You can't always do that because you'll be broke, but you may want to say, how can we agree to share expenses when the other one doesn't agree that that's money worth spending on? Look for natural ends to money discussions, Kirkham says. She recommends writing down questions down and waiting for a time to bring them up. Or use pop culture, she says. If you see a movie or a TV show where people are somehow dealing with money, you can ask, what do you think about that? And then have a conversation based on what you've seen. Work toward full honesty and transparency. Any question can be put on the table, but you're not allowed to ask a question that you're also not willing to answer yourself. So you kind of have a shared agreement on, mutual disclosure. If he talks about his maybe even embarrassing debts, you kind of have to talk about yours. You're going into it with an even Steven fairness atmosphere in the conversation. She says you might want to set guidelines around money talk, agreeing on some boundaries, but keep the atmosphere respectful and manageable. So no name calling, no raising of voices, and especially listening to what your partner's saying. And maybe there's a time limit on financial discussion, or maybe you don't talk about money when it's your date night as a couple, and certainly not talking about money in front of other friends or family, because that can be awkward and might betray your privacy, and it might put your friends on the spot. If you're talking about, whether you should take a 2-week trip to Italy or Australia this summer, and you're with friends who can't afford to take a vacation at all, that would appear very impolite. So you want some guidelines around financial discussion. She says you have to get to what's behind the money discomfort. Pay attention to the discussions and make a mental note of the topics or the situations that escalate or get heated. And that could be an indication of deeper issues in your relationship about resentment or entitlement or expectation or values. And that might lead to a need for deeper and more meaningful discussions. And that's one of the things you might bring into couples therapy or to couples coaching is, okay, at first we were talking about how to save for a house, but then that led to a bigger discussion of, I always feel controlled by you and I resent your control. What is behind the money discussions? And that money can be a springboard to other dynamics in the relationship. And the last one that she says, which of course is going to be one of my favorites, consider couples therapy or professional help. If you have sticking points or you have difficulty negotiating parameters around money, or it gets too intense or too heated, you may need kind of a mediator. Not in the sense of a financial planner, which is a different professional skill and a different scope of practice. But, I've worked with a lot of couples on these money issues, and it's exploring what's fair and what's healthy to the relationship, and what can you do now and what can be sustained in the future. And a lot of it is about how can we have healthy communication about money and learn those skills in a way that extends long beyond the time that you work. That's one of the things, I kind of sell couples therapy and relationship coaching about, is that you're making an investment in the short term, but these are skills that would last you long after we don't know each other anymore. It feels like a three-way practically when I'm working with couples, because I'm right in there helping you with some of the most intimate aspects of your relationships: money, sex, drugs, everything. But yet, it's in a professional context, and, it's an investment in learning communication skills now that will serve you forever after. Those skills will last long beyond the time that you're actually in couples therapy or relationship coaching. That's why it's a good investment for relationships, including early on. I've done couples therapy with couples who've been together only a few months, because they say, we've only been together a few months, but we really want to start off on the right foot. And you've been doing this for a long time. You've seen gay male couples for 28 years. Based on what you've seen, surely there must be some guidelines that you have for a couple that is only 3 months old. And I would say, actually, yes, I do. There's quite a lot. So that is always available to you, either with me or one of my associates at gaytherapyla.com. And I want to be shameless, speaking of money and book royalties, to talk about, I'm sorry, I can be irreverent sometimes, but people tell me that's what they like about me. But with plugging my book, so I don't do that much on this podcast show, and I decided to. If you go to Amazon, it's the easiest way, really. My book, Self-Empowerment, Have the Life You Want, and then the tagline is How to Close the Gap Between How Life Is and How You Would Like It to Be. And there's a whole section on finances. There's other sections on mental health, your health, relationships and sex, your career, your family, your community, and your spirituality. But the section on finances goes into what there's I've had a blog about too on gaytherapyla.com about 7 steps toward financial health, and then also some other guidelines about, again, how to close the gap between where you are and where you'd like to be. And that's the whole point of the book, self-empowerment. And then I also discuss a little bit of the work of Louise Hay and others about how do we define what prosperity is. We talked about health a second ago, but there's also the idea of what is prosperity for you and your partner or your fiance about financial health. And that would be a separate conversation from what is sexual health, what is relational, emotional health, what is career health. And the book kind of covers all that. So if you just look for Self-Empowerment, Have the Life You Want by Ken Howard, LCSW, you might enjoy reading that. And if you would like to reach me about having couples therapy or relationship coaching, or, of course, the individual work, I work mostly with individuals, but with couples too. Gaytherapyla.com is the website, or you can call and text me. The number is 310-339-5778. That's 310-339-5778. And either I or one of my associate clinicians at Gay Therapy LA would be glad to help you. As always, your questions, your suggestions for episodes, topics, or blog topics are always welcome. And thanks for listening. I hope you get some benefit from this. And I'll see you next time.